Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Boardmasters with me, Chris Mullins, and today I'm going to be having a little bit of a reaction to my video that caused a bit of controversy last week, asking why isn't there any great board game adaptations of popular video games. And you know, I got a lot of pushback on it, far more than I necessarily would have expected, and so I just wanted to talk about it and my motivations behind the video again, just to try and clear it up. First and foremost, I will absolutely hold my hands up and say I had no idea that Mechs vs Minions or indeed Star Wars Rebellion were based on licensed video games. I must have read close to a dozen articles before that video, certainly ever since I got into the hobby, because coming from a video game background, as I've said many times, I've always been a video game fan. I was aware of multiple video game adaptations like Dark Souls and Bloodborne and the big name ones, but when I checked them against BGG, the ratings were always fairly average. So I read a number of articles just trying to find some games that I'd be interested in, and hence then why I bought the likes of Ni no Kuni 2 and XCOM and This War of Mine, which are all games I thoroughly enjoy. But in these articles, none of them mentioned either Star Wars Rebellion, so I just assumed it was based in the Star Wars universe, or Mechs v Minions. I just had no idea that was based on a licensed game, and not being a fan of League of Legends, it never caught my interest or attention that they were using the IP in a board game. So yeah, I hold my hand up for those, so I was completely wrong on that count. The other thing I want to address, obviously, a lot of people seem to take it as a statement of mine or an opinion that I believe there are no great board games, which obviously isn't the truth. I mean, I own 3 of them, and I've got Frostpunk backed, and hoping that joins This War of Mine as being a very, very highly rated one. It looks outstanding. But again, it was more of a question as somebody who's new to the hobby. Board Game Geek ratings, whether we like it or not, are probably the biggest tool that newcomers to the hobby have in terms of trying to assess what the best games are, what games are great. And yeah, there are flaws to the BGG ranking system that I found out post the video last week, and that's a whole nother conversation really, in that the more ratings a game has, they seem to be artificially pushed up the rankings. So in the top 100 you'll have games with ratings of 7.7, while you'll have games like This War of Mine, which have a rating of 8, that have just snuck into the top 150 because they don't have as many ratings. And yeah, you can certainly argue that, and I'd probably agree. But at the same time, for someone new to the hobby, just looking at the ratings to get an indication of what games I should buy, there was a distinct lack of clear and obvious video game games. And all of the big name ones like Fallout, Doom, Civilization, many of these ones that have been recommended and highlighted as a result of this video, you click through and they're around that, either just below 7 in the case of I think Dark Souls, and creeping up to 7.3, maybe 7.4, which again, coming from a video game background, and I highlighted Metacritic in the video before, on there, great video games on Metacritic start from 8. Generally, unless it's something that really interests you, if you're just getting an idea of how well a game is liked, you rarely even look below 8. There's plenty of games below 8 that are very good and that I love, but they aren't ones that the community as a whole love. And that's kind of what I was getting behind in terms of the great aspect as well. So I was coming from 10 years of using Metacritic and the video games community, where anything less than 8 out of 10 is considered good, certainly good, maybe very good, but not great. And then come across to board games, and it seems like it's treated as anything over a 7 is very good, anything above a 7.5 is great, and that's taken some getting used to, I admit, and that is maybe why the wording of my title for last week was probably a bit more confrontational than it needed to be, and so a lot of people then assumed it was clickbait, which was absolutely not the intention. Certainly not in the traditional sense of getting people to come on and just comment to drive up the views. It was a question that I genuinely had and was looking to have a conversation about. Whether we agree or disagree is fine. There's plenty of space for different opinions, but it wasn't something I was just using to try and drive up, using controversy for controversy's sake. And I will hold up my hands and say, yeah, the language in the title probably was more confrontational and did lead to a confrontational response from a lot of people where, as I said earlier, they just started mentioning games as a sort of way to try and disprove the statement that I wasn't making. I was asking a question, and again, a lot of the games that were mentioned, people were coming back and saying, "You're wrong. Dark Souls is great," but then Dark Souls isn't highly rated on BGG, which was the question I was asking, so it didn't actually conflict with the question I was asking. It didn't prove any point other than that one person liked Dark Souls. So it didn't quite lead to the constructive conversation that I was hoping to have. It did in some cases. Some people who took the time to watch the video, we were able to have a good discussion. But I think, yeah, unfortunately, probably due to my part in the confrontational nature of the wording of the title, a lot of people just didn't watch it and read the title, took it as a statement or an opinion as opposed to a question, and just started listing games or telling me I was wrong, which was disappointing. And so I apologise for that, if that's how I made you feel. But conversely, on top of that, I mean, I got into this community last summer, and my introduction to the community has been through content creators like Board Game Co. and Quackalape, as I've highlighted in the past. And, you know, Quackalape especially is so passionate about talking how wonderful and friendly and welcoming this community is. And I have to say, in the most part, that hasn't been my experience. I mean, maybe I haven't engaged with the community in the right ways, but I mean, my main experiences with this community over the past 6 months have been largely negative, outside of those extremely positive content creators. Like, probably my first experience was the Dead Reckoning campaign, where, okay, people had valid gripes with the way the campaign was run in terms of daily unlocks being used as opposed to stretch goals, and then some of those daily unlocks were, oh hey, here's a new playthrough video, and you know, that was frustrating for me as well as a backer. But the comment section of that campaign was just toxic. It was vitriolic, and that's carried through a number of campaigns right up to today, where we have Tiny Epic Dungeons, I think, forgive me if I got the title wrong, which I've backed as well, and they had to issue an update last week stating how abuse, not only towards them but towards a person in the comment section, is unacceptable, because that person raised the valid issue that the cover box artwork was too sexualized in terms of, I think, a female elf character, and she didn't feel it was suitable for children. And the game creators, to their credit, agreed and changed the artwork. And, you know, someone raised a valid concern, a number of people agreed, including the creators of the game, and they made the decision to change it. They weren't forced into it. But again, the comments section just exploded, and it was quite horrible, unpleasant abuse towards this woman for raising a complaint, and also towards the game designers for bending a knee in terms of to pressure about equality and whatnot, and just really, really unpleasant. On top of that, I think it wasn't a channel I followed. Again, I only follow sort of, as I said, Board Game Co and Quackalape, but it was Alex at Board Game Co that highlighted a content creator closed their channel within the last month or two because they were getting such targeted abuse. And then with my video, which was intended to be a constructive conversation and a genuine query from someone new to the hobby, and again, I have some responsibility of this in terms of the wording, but it seemed like the vast majority of people instantly came back with a conflict, wanting to have a conflict over it, instead of actually taking the time to understand what my argument was, in which case, and something that I still to this day believe was a reasonable question to ask and a reasonable argument to make, but people wanted, their instant reaction was to get into a conflict and prove why I was wrong and my opinion was wrong, despite, as I said, not having an opinion. So, you know, it's mixed feelings as a result of that review. It certainly wasn't what I intended for the majority of the reaction, and it's certainly not something I regret, because it's something I'm going to learn from going forward. But again, I apologize for my part in it in terms of if in terms of the nature of the title as such. But yeah, I think the overwhelming feeling is disappointment, really, in a community that I thought would react in a more positive, constructive way, but instead it sort of reinforced the negative sort of image I've had of, certainly not the whole community, by all means. I'm certainly not saying this whole community is toxic and negative, by not even slightly suggesting that, but there is definitely an undercurrent and a vocal element of this community that seems to be very aggressive and confrontational, which surprises me. I understand them being passionate, by all means. That this hobby wouldn't have survived, like computer games and whatnot coming in, if it wasn't for the passion of those people. And well, I'm thankful for that, because I wouldn't be getting into this wonderful hobby if they hadn't kept it alive. But it needs to be channeled in the right way, and I am more than happy to have disagreements, as long as they're respectful and people make the effort to try and understand where I'm coming from, and I will make the effort to understand where they're coming from. So I guess my sort of message coming out of this video is just to say, let's just have a conversation, let's get a dialogue going, let's be open-minded and constructive with our opinions. And you know, it's fine to disagree, but let's at least try and understand where the other party's coming from, and try and be respectful, because just because someone has a different opinion doesn't mean they're wrong. Just as it doesn't mean, if I disagree with you, it doesn't mean that I think you're wrong. It just means that you have a different opinion, and that's perfectly fine and valid. So I hope that's something we can build on going forward, and I'll certainly do my part to that and try and, again, be a bit more careful with the wording of my videos. As I've said, I'm brand new to content creation as well as this hobby, so it may have been just naivety on my part, and that's something I will try and learn from and develop in the future. But with that all being said, again, I would love to have a dialogue down below in the comment section, and a bit back and forth with people, and get a positive conversation going. But I'm going to leave it there and say bye to you all. Thank you for watching, and look after yourself, stay safe, and have a good one. Bye bye now.